Taiwan's opposition reaches a deal that could reshape the country's January presidential election.
It's been a busy day of high-profile arrivals here in San Francisco, from U.S. President Joe Biden to Chinese President Xi Jinping and Taiwan's chips titan Morris Chang. And we've got the latest details.
Labour unions say Taiwan's government must up mandatory pension contributions if it wants to face the challenges of a super-aged population.
Plus, Taiwan explores a new renewable and efficient energy source. Good evening and welcome to TaiwanPlus News. I'm Liao reporting from Taipei. The race to be Taiwan's next president has taken a significant turn after two parties' candidates agreed to run together. The KMT's Hou You-yi and Taiwan People's Party Ke Wen-je will form a joint ticket for the January vote, a move that threatens the ruling DPP's grip on power. Stash Butler reports.
A show of unity between Taiwan's two most powerful opposition parties after a last-minute deal that transforms the country's presidential race. Taiwan's century-old Kuomintang, or KMT, has agreed to fight January's election alongside political newcomers, the Taiwan People's Party. Their two candidates joined on a single ticket.
今天我们都在写台湾的历史，不单是第三波民主改革而已。我们这一次的联合竞选，到未来要组联合政府，都能够让台湾汇集更多的力量，让这个社会变得更好。
For weeks, Hou You-yi of the KMT and Ke Wen-je, the maverick founder of the Taiwan People's Party, have been fighting a fractured campaign, their division risking defeat in a four-way race. Fears of splitting the opposition vote are what brought the two parties here to hammer out a last-minute agreement. That's after weeks of back and forth and meetings with no concrete result. Now they've agreed to unite, Ke and Hou pose a serious challenge to the ruling party candidate, current Vice President Lai Ching-te of the DPP. He's led opinion polls for months, but those polls also suggest he'd lose to a united opposition.
The polling suggests that the cumulative sum of the supporters of Hou You-yi and Ke Wen-je would support the ticket, minus only a small percentage point, 1 or 2 points.
The new coalition still needs to announce which candidate will run for president and which for vice president. An order they say will be based on who's doing better in the polls. But regardless of the lineup, the joint ticket deal is a boost for Taiwan's opposition and a blow for the ruling party's chances of holding on to power. Patrick Chen and Stash Butler in Taipei for TaiwanPlus.
While the KMT and TPP figure out their joint ticket, the ruling Democratic Progressive Party has revealed its list of at-large legislative candidates for January's election. Topping the list is Ling Yueqin, the head of a child protection NGO, followed by Puma Shen, who chairs the Doublethink Lab and is known for his work on China's information warfare. Incumbent Legislative Speaker You Xi-kun is on the list too. Taiwan citizens will vote for lawmakers alongside the president in January. Aside from their local representative, voters also cast ballots for political parties, which get seats based on the number of votes received. Those seats are given to candidates on the at-large list. Meanwhile, chips giant TSMC's founding father Morris Chang has also arrived in the United States to serve as Taiwan's lead envoy at the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Leaders Summit. We go back again to our reporter Joyce Tseng, who's on the ground.
92-year-old Morris Chang, the founder of chip-making giant TSMC, is now in San Francisco as Taiwan's lead envoy to the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Leaders Summit. It's Chang's sixth time representing Taiwan's President Tsai Ing-wen at the Regional Trade Forum, who's blocked from attending by Beijing, which doesn't recognize the self-ruled nation's sovereignty or head of state.
Morris is the number one person can present Taiwan, especially in the economy's point of view, to introduce Taiwan to the international world.
Chang's arrival comes just as China's President Xi Jinping also lands in San Francisco for the summit, with a much more vocal crowd waiting for him in the city. Others came to protest against Xi's regime, calling out his violent oppression and disregard for human rights.
我在国内，对吧？反映你们禁止我出境；我在国外反映你们不理，你们打我。那你习近平来了，我就当面讨公道，行吗？
Taiwan and China's contentious dynamic is one that APEC host country, the U.S., straddles, officially following Beijing's One China policy, recognizing China's government over Taiwan's. But Washington keeps robust unofficial business and ideological ties with Taipei. And some onlookers here hope this week's summit can help foster more collaboration between the three, all of whom are APEC members.
What I am hoping is for some continued goodwill, non-war, and also coming together more as a global economy versus China, versus the US, versus Taiwan, because eventually we're all going to have to figure out how to get along together.
Free trade is really important and leads to, I guess, less like emotionally charged relationships between countries. But I do think that continued relationships with Taiwan is really important.
And fostering trade is exactly what Taiwan's APEC delegates are here to do.
Taiwan's global lead in advanced chips manufacturing and high-tech innovation is what makes it an attractive and competitive trade partner. And that's what the country's delegates have been using to negotiate even closer ties with the other 20 APEC economies. And they're hopeful that that will help Taiwan get into even more multilateral trade pacts, which they say is important not just for Taiwan's peace and stability, but for the entire region.
But before getting down to business, a welcome dinner for the delegation, hosted by Taiwan's representative to the U.S., Xiaobi Kim, who's being closely watched back home as a potential running mate for incumbent Vice President Lai Ching-te, the frontrunner for Taiwan's presidential elections just a couple of months away.
台湾必须跟国际接轨，参与国际组织是非常重要，而且可以让我们掌握国际趋势的平台。
While here in San Francisco, Xiao is choosing to focus on what Taiwan has to offer its APEC members. And with Morris Chang at the delegation's helm, whose company has put in one of the largest direct foreign investments into the U.S., their message is clear. Taiwan is a business partner to be taken seriously. Justin Wu and Joyce Zhen in San Francisco for TaiwanPlus.
Labor rights activists and unions in Taiwan are calling on the government to increase employers' mandatory pension contributions. That comes as the country heads toward a super-age society in 2025. Rick Liao has more.
Living expenses, medical fees, and utility bills. Activists outside Taiwan's cabinet building show the financial pressures piling on top of retirees in the country. Which is why they're asking the government to raise the amount private companies have to contribute to employees' pensions.
未来你一定生活一定，没办法，就说没办法支付未来的退休生活所必须支应的一些费用。
With people living longer and fewer Taiwanese having children, Taiwan is fast becoming a super-aged society. By 2025, more than 20% of the population will be aged over 65. These labour rights activists say upping pension contributions is the best way to protect this vulnerable sector of society, crucial for Taiwan as it faces up to the challenges of a super-aged population. The law currently says employers must pay 6% of workers' salaries into pension pots. But the government says that number is just a baseline.
我们其实是很希望说企业的获利能够由劳资共享，就是如果企业有获利，那劳资双方其实可以协商议定优于法令的提缴率，就是高于6%的部分。
Taiwan's mandatory private sector employer pension contributions are comparable to neighbours South Korea at 4.5% and Japan at 8.7%. But labour rights activists say the government should be doing more to protect pensions as wages stagnate and the cost of living rises.
I think there is a misconception that Taiwan is a cheap and low-cost country, but when you compare with other advanced countries, Taiwan's housing prices are one of the highest in the world, especially in Taipei. Taiwan's grocery prices are not actually cheap. They are actually as expensive as Japan right now.
National elections are just around the corner here in Taiwan. The cost of living, stagnating wages, and how to deal with an ageing population are not just daily concerns for Taiwanese, but also hot political topics. Now, the country's labour unions protesting here say it's time for action to alleviate some of the pressure put on workers as they face an uncertain future. Andy Xue and Rick Liao for TaiwanPlus.
The Labor Ministry says Taiwan's worker shortage is set to keep growing. It's predicting tens of thousands of newly vacant positions in the first quarter alone. With the local workforce aging and shunning blue-collar jobs, the question is whether migrant labor can fill the gap. John Van Trieste reports.
A pillar of Taiwan's economy in trouble. Manufacturers like this metal parts maker accounted for over 30% of the country's GDP last year. But it's getting harder to keep these machines running. As the population ages, more workers are retiring, and few young people are replacing them.
传统制造就是本是属于人力密集的工课啊，都是靠技术本位嘛。啊，就嘛这没人哦，后面就是自然就是没有人去拿这个订单。
A survey this month by online job bank 104 found the number of unfilled jobs in Taiwan had broken 1 million for the 9th month in a row. And if government predictions are right, that number will go up another 50,000 in the first quarter. Manufacturing is far from the only hard-hit sector.
现在年轻人不喜欢我们这种工地劳动的。
餐饮业啦，量贩业以及这个饭店业、观光业、运输业的部分，其实可能还是人才比较吃紧的一个情况。
For years, migrant labor has helped to plug the gaps in Taiwan's workforce, but it hasn't fixed the problem. So far, Taiwan only accepts migrant workers from 4 Southeast Asian countries. Some sectors like agriculture still have strict caps on hiring them, while others like hospitality remain closed. Talks about opening to Indian workers are expected to move forward by next month at the earliest. But officials say the reported number of Indian workers to be let in, up to 100,000, isn't set in stone. All this raises questions of whether Taiwan's million worker shortage may simply become the norm, leaving its key industries struggling to fill the gap. Klein Wang and John Van Trieste for TaiwanPlus.
Most of Taiwan's energy transition has been focused on the most abundant renewable energy sources like wind and solar. But a new technology developed in Taiwan could provide another option. Jeremy Olivier has more.
This box, no bigger than a bedroom cabinet, could soon be an important part of Taiwan's green energy efforts. It houses a system for producing hydrogen power, developed by Taiwan's top research body, Academia Sinica, and the Taiwan Power Company. Hydrogen has long been considered a potential source of green energy, but the methods to produce it generally aren't eco-friendly or require too much energy and money. But Taipower says this new approach is not only clean, but also uses a fraction of the energy needed for existing methods. And they say it's more efficient.
就近在发电厂或其他需要用到氢能的地点来生产，所以它就不用长的氢能的输送管线。我想这是一个非常有效率的，我们可以用既有的天然气管线，在未来在末端就可以取得氢气。
Essentially, the new tech cranks up the heat on natural gas, which cracks the methane into hydrogen gas and solid carbon. That leftover hydrogen gets burned to create zero-carbon electricity for homes, businesses, and factories. Plus, the solid carbon can be used in industrial production. Having another source of renewable energy could be a game-changer for Taiwan, which imports most of its energy from abroad, and is pledged to achieve net zero emissions by 2050. At an event to introduce the new hydrogen project, Taiwan's economy minister said it's important that Taiwan continue to explore all options.
比较长远来讲，再生能源生产滤氢的技术要去克服。那目前同步的也跟一些国家，包括日本、韩国、新加坡一样，也在研究这个再生能源怎么从国外进口到台湾来。
While the new tech is promising, it still has a way to go. The developers say a pilot program and a 65 kilowatt power generator burns a gas mix that's only 10% hydrogen, while the other 90% is methane gas.
市面上仍然是没有办法用纯氢来做大型的涡轮发电机。在2030年之后，这件事情会达成。我们到时候的去碳燃氢，大概那个时候技术也完全成熟了。
Still, the promise of clean hydrogen was strong enough for Taiwan to add it into its net zero roadmap last year. The hope is that the country will have a full arsenal of renewable sources to help rid itself of carbon emissions by 2050. Dolphine Chen and Jeremy Olivier for TaiwanPlus.
For more on Taiwan's efforts to boost hydrogen power, our reporter Jeremy Olivier spoke with Meg Lin, CEO of Taiwan Hydrogen and Fuel Cell Partnership.
Taiwan has been pushing for more renewables in its energy mix for years, but it's only more recently that hydrogen has been discussed as a viable option. So why is that?
In the past, Taiwan has worked very hard in offshore wind power and solar panel PV energy, and I think it's already very successful right now because all the people and residents can see lots of the renewable energy in Taiwan. But for the long term, because Taiwan is full of the industry and science park, so we need more and more energy consumption and larger about the electricity. So if we need a very stable and a basic power, and it must be a clean energy, and I think hydrogen energy will be the future option.
What are some of the barriers to using hydrogen as a clean energy source?
For Taiwan, the barrier maybe the first is the resource of the hydrogen. Where to get the hydrogen? Maybe import to Taiwan is one way, and the other way is in Taiwan we full of the offshore wind power. So we can use those renewable energy in the future. Like at the nighttime, we don't use so much of the green energy, and we can use those green energy electrolyze the water to get the hydrogen.
Do you think enough is being done to incorporate hydrogen power in Taiwan? And what more could be done policy-wise?
We just announced the hydrogen strategy on 2021. Is slower than Korea and Japan. And also the the budget or subsidy is a little bit slower than the European country or the Japan or the US. So I think if we can co-work with other country and our government can invest a more balanced scale with other country, and to helping our technology and the market to become the hydrogen market in Taiwan, and helping the industry people to grow up to co-work with other countries to put our technology in the global supply chain.
That was Meg Lin, CEO of Taiwan Hydrogen and Fuel Cell Partnership, speaking with our reporter Jeremy Olivier. An Australian government report says cybercrime in the country has surged by 23% in 1 year. The Australian cybersecurity report says Chinese hackers are the main perpetrators of serious hacking on Australian companies, infrastructure, and assets. The report says a new AUKUS defense agreement with the UK and the US might have made the country more of a target. Washington-based think tank the Cato Institute has released a report confirming there are over $19 billion worth of delayed US weapons to Taiwan. TaiwanPlus has seen an early copy of that report. Its findings show that 62% of the delayed systems are considered traditional weapons, with just 2 orders of F-16 jets and Abrams battle tanks making up over 50% of that category. 22% of the overall delayed systems are so-called asymmetric weapons, things that are cheaper and more survivable, things like high-mobility rocket systems, drones, and Harpoon coastal defense missiles. The last 15% is ammunition. For more on what this means for Taiwan's security, our reporter Jaime Ocon spoke to the report's author, Eric Gomez, who's with the Cato Institute's Defense and Foreign Policy Department.
Before we get to the findings of this report, can you quickly explain what's the difference between asymmetric weapons and traditional weapons?
So asymmetric capabilities are primarily asymmetric because of how they counter an opponent. So if your opponent has a lot of ships and a lot of airplanes and a lot of tanks, a symmetric response would be building your own ships, airplanes, and tanks to fight theirs. An asymmetric response would be investing in different ways to counter them. In the context of Taiwan, asymmetric capabilities usually refer to especially land-based systems because of their mobility, systems that have a small logistics footprint that is harder for China to target.
In this new report, your findings show that a vast majority of the weapons that are delayed are traditional weapons, and that's despite Taiwan's military trying to improve on this asymmetric strategy. So what does this say about the way that Taiwan's military is currently shaped right now?
So I think it tells us that Taiwan is still very much in the traditional military tradition, for lack of a better word. And it makes, I think that, it's easy to criticize Taiwan for this, but I think it makes sense given some of the limitations they're working with, right? Moving to an asymmetric defense strategy comes with trade-offs, and it does make your military less flexible. It does make it more limited in what it can do. You can't get that much for any unit amount of money. Now, if Taiwan had a defense budget of $30 billion a year, then some of this trade-off between asymmetric and traditional goes away because you can afford to do both.
One of the biggest recommendations that you've put forward is for the US to start restricting Taiwan to only purchase asymmetric weapons. Do you think that that's actually possible?
I think that where I'm sitting, the primary value the United States can have is using the leverage we have, right? Because the United States has a lot of leverage over Taiwan in terms of, or a lot of potential leverage, because we are the only real external arms supplier. If the United States were to tell the Taiwanese, hey, you need to do X, Y, and Z if you want to get continued support, I think there's a high likelihood Taiwan would comply. The problem is, politically, we haven't been willing to really do that, or in attempts to sort of do that in the past and tie certain forms of support to Taiwan to Taiwanese behavior, often sort of politically doesn't work out on the U.S. side. But the question is, would the U.S. have the political willingness to follow through and actually do something about that? In terms on the Taiwanese side, I think that it would be difficult, right? But I'm kind of okay with putting Taiwan in a difficult position because we haven't put them in a difficult position, and we've gotten the self-defense strategy that we've gotten.
That was Eric Gomez from the Cato Institute, based in Washington, D.C., speaking to Jaime Okan. Water cannons are being deployed in India as New Delhi continues to suffocate under a blanket of toxic smog. Reese Ayers has the story.
Blasting water into the skies to fight smog in the world's most polluted city. These are New Delhi's attempts to lift the toxic blanket that's smothering the Indian capital.
परेशानी तो यही है कि हम जैसे आते हैं सुबह वो लगता है ऐसे फॉग है लेकिन होता स्मॉग है बेसिकली आप जब इनहेल करते हैं तब पता लगता है गले में तो थोड़ा बहुत जरूर वो रहता है और धुआं टाइप लगता है आंखों में भी जलन सी होती है पानी सा आता है जैसे वो है कुछ ठंड की वजह से भी हो रहा है
New Delhi is no stranger to smoggy skies, but pollution tends to spike after large festivals. Concentrations of toxic chemicals in the air are particularly high after the country celebrated Diwali, also known as the Festival of Lights, last weekend.
ना तो इंडिया गेट दिख रहा ना पार्लियामेंट वाले दोनों बिल्डिंग नजर आ रही हैं लेकिन ये सब सारा का सारा पोल्यूशन बढ़ने का जो मेन कारण है वो हम लोग ही हैं क्योंकि हमें पता है कि क्रैकर्स बर्न करना और दूध पराली जलाना ये सब हमारी स्वास्थ्य के लिए हानिकारक है लेकिन फिर भी हम मानते नहीं हैं दूसरे कर रहे हैं इसलिए हमको भी कौन देख रहा है ये सब अंदर से जो उनकी अंतरात्मा है वो इस बात के लिए मानने को तैयार नहीं है
With over 300 million cars on the roads, vehicle emissions are the largest source of air pollution in India. Coal fire emissions, dust from construction sites, and burning waste and crop stubble also contribute to the issue. The anti-smog guns shoot water droplets into the air. The moisture clings to the pollutants and brings them to the ground.
अभी हमने देखा कि दिल्ली में जब बारिश हुई थी तो खास तौर से जो डस्ट पोल्यूशन था उसमें काफ़ी कमी आई थी जो धूल के कण हैं वो सेपरेस हुए थे अब बारिश का जो असर है 4 दिन बाद अब धीरे-धीरे ख़त्म हो रहा है इसलिए पूरे दिल्ली के अंदर पानी के छिड़काव के अभियान को तेज किया जा रहा है
Despite current pollution levels, experts say that New Delhi's smog situation has been slowly improving over the years. The city has periodically banned older vehicles from the roads and built the world's largest public transport system powered by natural gas. Some experts are looking to Beijing as an example of how hyper-polluted cities can tackle persistent smog. Air pollution there has reduced by around 50% in the last 10 years through a number of measures, including banning new coal capacities and raising engine standards. Until more measures are introduced in India, however, the country will continue to rely on water cannons to help disperse the smog that engulfs its capital and chokes its millions of residents. Scott Huang and Rees for TaiwanPlus.
An unusual bird, the puteki, has been crowned New Zealand's Bird of the Century, winning by a landslide. The bird, known for puking, grunting, and its unique mating ritual, was championed by American-British comedian John Oliver. On his weekly talk show, he urged people around the world to vote and also placed billboards in several cities. The competition, raising awareness of New Zealand's native birds, received a record number of votes. The puteki won with 290,000, while the country's national bird, the kiwi, came in second with around 12,000. That poor kiwi bird. Thank you for watching TaiwanPlus News. You can visit the TaiwanPlus website or our social media for more stories from Taiwan and around the world. Finally, check out these dogs in kimonos. They are receiving blessings during Japan's Shichigo-san festival, normally meant for kids, but this ceremony is just for pups. I'm Liao. Take care, and I will see you next time.